Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I had a book get stuck in my zipper, my book bag zipper. Good morning, everybody. So it is Sunday, as always, and we are going through Galatians. This has been a winter break for my kids, and so I'm exhausted. Because we have had a lot of fun. We got to go to the Pokemon offices, and they gave my kids tons of Pokemon cards. And me and my son went to the gum wall here in Seattle, which is just people sticking chewing gum all over a wall. What else did we get to see? And then we went and saw yesterday, me and both the kids went and saw the troll under the bridge. There's a troll, giant concrete troll that's got its hand on like a VW bug. And so yeah, my son went and picked the troll's nose, which was a real classy moment for me. So get my eyeballs back. So yeah, that's happening. Parenting full time, full frontal parenting. Very tired. Have you guys had a great weekend? Hope so. See you're chatting there. Hey, I need caffeine. Here, yeah, the gum wall is it's like really a bizarre thing to happen. And I heard they cleaned it once, and then everybody came back and put gum on there. I mean, I need to get some sun. I look like a vampire. Hey, don't forget to like this if you're here. It helps with our algorithm to help us get more trolls to come make fun of me. So don't forget to like and subscribe and to put on your notice so you'll know when we turn this thing on. It'll go bing. I think that's what it does. So that would be great. It really helps if you follow us and like the like the talk. That helps a lot. So, anywho, so yeah, we had a great time. Kids got some cool Pokemon stuff, and yeah, they have to hide it from Dad, so I don't sell it all. No, I wouldn't do that. Well, listen, let's jump into this because we're going to take kind of a curveball today for Galatians. In Galatians, we're going to go through Galatians, but we're going to finish up part 3. The end of 3 is always like everybody. That's when everybody gets a little uncomfortable for some reason. Oh look, I broke my necklace, and so my necklace broke, and so I made another one, and it's kind of like a Jim Morrison. I'm a hippie now. I had the little silver beads, and I didn't want to waste the silver beads. So there you go. Follow me for more fashion tips. No, but we're going to get into Galatians, but we're going to look at some different things today. We are going to talk a little bit about this man, right here, who helped with the Good Friday Agreement that ended the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And if you all know, I'm a huge fan of Northern Ireland. My best friend Pete Rollins is from Northern Ireland, and I go there a lot and visit a lot, and I really love it there. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that because I think it's important that we talk about peace. obviously the world is going crazy, and Israel and Palestine thing is happening, and it's horrific. It is horrific. It is a horrific loss of life. And I've had some people from the Israel side push back on me a little bit, but my point is that it's, for me, it's not about sides. I mean, it does. If Palestine was doing this to Israel, you know, I would still, I would be saying cease to stop, you know. So, like, I have this pin down here somewhere that says "Stop War." You know, how do we end conflict and not go to war? And I feel like with the tensions that are mounting back up with the upcoming election for us here in the States, there's going to be more and more division. And I think it's important that we talk about what it is to be a peacemaker. Now, ironically, not even ironically, I guess, just that this is what this book's about. It's a rebuke letter and a letter about living in community, which is wild. You know, it's like, hey, you guys, stop being jerks and be nice to each other. You know, what happened? You got it for a while, and now you're like, and the whole thing that's happening is it has a lot to do with religion and faith that's separating these folks. It's weird. The other day I had someone who was like, yeah, most wars are about religion. I'm like, well, you know, if you look, the religion is usually being manipulated for a certain power or people or finances. You know, it's not always about, like, if you look deeper into the thing, it's about, you know, usually human rights and how we treat each other as humans. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I'm excited. So we're going to go ahead and just jump into this. But this is the end of 3, you know, and 3 started off with Paul really going in full throttle with foolish Galatians. What magician has cast an evil spell on you? You know, he's like letting them have it. And questioning, like, hey, what are you doing with this works stuff and getting back into the old system, and why are you rebuilding the old system? So he goes in a little bit to explain part of Genesis 12 about the promise of Abraham to the Galatians. And, you know, remember, the conflict here is that you've got Jewish Christians who would like to see the Gauls get circumcised, would like to see them kind of practice more religious tradition, and Paul is saying they don't need to do that, you know, and you guys can be a community and you guys can practice your traditions, but they don't need to, you know, be circumcised, and they don't need to do things like that in order to be closer to God. That's not what this is about. And what's really great is we'll get closer to the end of the book, you realize that this isn't just about him defending himself and defending a religion or faith, but ultimately at the end, he's really worried about the people and what they're going to do to each other. So keep that in mind. Brothers and sisters, I give an example from daily life. Once a person's will, like will and testament, has been ratified, no one adds to it or annuls it. Now the promises were made to Abraham and to his offspring. It does not say and offsprings, it's as in many, but as says to your offspring, that is to one person who is Christ. I think he's doing some gymnastics here, but we'll let Paul do what he wants to do. Let Paul be Paul. My point is this, though. The law, which came 430 years later, and I think that's interesting. You know, the law really didn't get for 430 years. I can't even remember what happened 430 years ago. Can't even remember yesterday. So, no. So the law, which came 430 years later after Abraham, does not annul the covenant previously ratified by God, so to nullify the promise. For the inheritance comes for if the inheritance comes from the law, it is no longer comes from the promise. but God granted it to Abraham through the promise. So Paul is saying, like, to his brothers and sisters who know who follow the scriptures and stuff, he's like, you just know this story, and he's using that to say, like, the Torah, to say, like, this was a promise long before the law, and you're trying to force people to go into the law. You're going to go back to the law. And that's not what we're doing. Now, I've talked a little bit about how, as Christians, in the Christian culture has created a new type of law. And both sides do it to kind of, who's in and who's out, us and them. And we all do it to a certain extent. And, we all will scapegoat. Like, I think I don't scapegoat, but I do scapegoat. You need to find yourself doing it. I'll do it on social media, or I'll do it with a certain group. So it's not, we create new laws, but this one is he's trying to say is like this: there doesn't need to be a law. And in a way, there's this theme that I find that runs through the Gospels of like, kind of, live and let live, but we continue to choose what we want to tell people have to do, rather than allowing people to live. And I'm going to argue with a way that I think we could maybe think differently and act differently towards each other that would make would make a difference within our churches today, within politics today. It's like, how do we solve this issue of people tearing each other apart, the purpose of the law, and if we jump down to 19, Paul says, "Why then the law? It was added because of our transgressions, until the offspring would come to whom the promise had been made. And it was ordained through angels and by mediator. Now the mediator involves more than one party, but God is one." So, Paul is saying that the plan has always been for Christ to come. There's a lot of scholars that will say that doesn't seem to add up, and Paul is saying it does add up. And I was, a Pharisee, and this is what I believe is happening. Is the law then opposed for the promise of God? Certainly not. For a law had been given that could make us alive. If a law had been given and make us alive, then righteous would indeed come through the law. But the Scriptures has imprisoned all things under the power of sin, so that what was promised through faith in Jesus Christ might be given to those who believe. So, again, Paul's saying, like, this idea of, what was it? Check my notes. But this idea of prohibition used the law against us, aroused our curiosity, the forbidden fruit. It's like the promise ring, Here's a ring. It says you won't have sex till you're married. So I'm looking at and every time I look at the ring, I think, man, sex. I'm not having sex. And you think about sex, and you make a covenant to some group that sells rings, and it's really ridiculous. But we have our own kinds of purity culture now, and progressive churches is like, oh, we don't hang out with those people, and we don't talk to those people, and we don't, we can't cancel culture and things like that. Everybody has their own type of performance and purity culture that we have to continue to keep ourselves alive to when legalism sneaks in. Legalism always sneaks in. And it does it with both right and left. And it does it with good works and bad works. 23. Now before faith came, we were imprisoned and guarded under the law until faith would be revealed. Therefore the law was our disciplinarian until we were justified by faith. So they're saying the law was there to show that we were doing wrong and things like that until Christ could come and make us right. So now we're right with Christ. All is permissible. Not all is beneficial, but we are right with Christ. But now that faith has come, we are no longer subject to a disciplinarian. And I think about that and I think, how, Lord, I would have wished that they would have talked about this verse in Christian school growing up or at Christian camps or things like that. Like, to me, the church was more about discipline than anything growing up. To me, it was not, I saw love, I saw grace, but to me, that like the youth pastors and the teachers and the lay people seemed to think that Christianity was all about discipline. And if you mess up and it disciplines you, rather than it forgives you and frees you. So we get confused with what this really is. And the reason for religion, and so it becomes this disciplinarian thing. And now it becomes this thing where people want to take their convictions and turn them into law and legislate their convictions, which is not at all what we're called to do. That literally make it a law, like literally make their convictions law. They're so lack such actual faith in what they believe that they feel that they have to have the law and the government do it because they don't believe that God can do it or the Holy Spirit can do it. And so they have to think, well, we have to get this governed in. And we do it on both sides. So don't just think it's the right that does it. It's the left as well. We both do it. Of course, our side's the right one, right? Of course. Because we grew up a certain way, having certain situations and different backgrounds and different things that happened to us that caused us to be more this way than that way. But now that faith has come, we are no longer subject to a disciplinarian. For Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. As many of you were baptized into Christ, have clothed yourselves with Christ. Now listen to this. This is the part that sometimes people struggle with a little bit, because there's saying there's no identity in Christ. And I think there is a reason behind this. There is a reason. And dying to oneself, dying to one's identity, dying to one's thing is tough to do because we are a very identity-driven culture. And often people speak up because their identities are being questioned or not respected or not loved, or especially by religious people. And it makes sense to do that. And I think that we're going to talk about that. But we're going to talk about how do we do that but still live in a world where that's, how do we bring these two together? So because there is no longer, Paul says this, there is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. I think this one here never gets enough attention. There's no longer slave or free. I mean, when you say that to slave owners and you say that to slaves, something happens. Something's starting to change. Something's happening there. Something's rumbling. A rumbling is happening. There is no longer male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's offsprings, heirs according to the promise. So there is no identity in Christ. I would even say even Christianity is not an identity in Christ. That is something that we have created more, and who's in and who's out and things like that. So now the hard part of how do we disagree well, how do we build community, and how do we get what Paul's saying? Because Paul right here is trying to say, like, guys, there's no Gauls and there's no Jewish Christians. You're all one. The lack is the thing that we all have in common, is that we lack. We have a lack and we have to learn to live with that lack. We're human beings. There's a need that's never met within us. And we're always trying to compensate it with my politics or my identity, or if I could just do this or just get this, or this would change and everything would be better. And then we get into this suffering, and it seems like hierarchy. So I've suffered more, we've suffered, and so then we belittle each other's suffering and turn that into a system of lording over a new law. Well, those who suffer must be in control, and then like, then your voice gets shut down, and we shut down each other's voices. There's not enough microphones, and like, trust me, everybody has a microphone now. Everybody, we hear you. And then corporations play with us and try to get us to play off against each other as well. And it's really funny. And they put up flags and things like that and act like they, we love your cause this week. So let's look at this. But I wanted to look at this from a civil rights aspect, but from two of my favorite civil rights leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King and John Hume. And a lot of people might not realize this, but John Hume really did a lot. He helped stop a civil war, a 30-year civil war. I recommend this book. I've marked it. All right, so we make the switch over. As we make the switch over, I'll say, don't forget to help us by liking this. It helps us. If you use the methods of your oppressor, you will end up worse than your oppressor. That's Martin Luther King. If you use the methods of your oppressor, you will end up the worse than your oppressor. And so Paul is what he's trying to do is trying to get us to lose our identities as oppressors or the oppressed and find our identity there. He's saying, find your identity in grace. Find your identity in love. Find your identity with loving your enemy, being kind to those. And that's what comes out of, that's where Dr. King finds a lot of that. Gandhi finds a lot of, John Hume finds a lot of that. But it says, beware. And this is what I want to point out is the us and them thing. And it's not just like this thing of because, I grew up most of my life in conservative evangelicalism, early part of my life. And then I went left and to the left, literally, and made more progressive and emergent and all that kind of stuff. But then I realized that whole group has hang-ups and does things and does this kind of us and them thing. And that our identity always ends up being as this is the type of Christian I am, rather than this is I am. I'm human. I have no identity besides that. And you go, So, but Dr. King is trying to show us something, and John Hume is trying to show us something is how to build community, how to be in community. And Paul ultimately is begging this community, begging the Gauls and the Judaizers to come together and live life together till they die in this community. He is trying to literally bring peace to this community. And we in the American church are just so split. Outside the church, we're split. Christian, atheist, split. LGBTQ, AI, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. We're all we've got all this stuff, all these things, and what these folks are suggesting is something that's very interesting. It's something that brings people together. So, but I think the first thing is important to say is that if you use the methods of your oppressor, you will end up worse than your oppressor. And one of the things I've been seeing a lot of lately, and I think this is a mistake that we've got to not make, is becoming like our oppressor. And I think that's the mistake I see, the biggest thing happening nowadays. And I've said this and I attest to this, that I think it's because the lack in the Christian church is a lack of the progressives to embrace the Apostle Paul in the correct way. Like what Paul wrote, not reactionary Paul, but what Paul wrote and understanding what Paul wrote and what Paul meant. And I think they miss it. And so I think grace ends up not being as powerful as it could be, because I think Paul really gives us the best description and idea of what grace is. There, I said it. I was looking at this website earlier, and it was this website, not a website, like a post, and it was on deconstruction. And one of the things they were saying was the church that's produced people like Mark Driscoll and John Piper and Moeller, and these are people that I totally disagree with and think that their theology is awful. But it said that church should be burnt to the ground. Now this is a deconstructionist thing, like, and saying that these groups should, this type of the church that bears that kind of fruit should be burnt to the ground. Now, the reason I say that there's a red flag here for me is because that is really the terms of the enemy. I mean, I don't, I've sat with the founders of the MCC church, and they would tell me how their churches, the LGBTQ affirming churches in the early days, were burnt to the ground. African American churches, black people churches, black folks churches were burnt to the ground. Often that is the way that the enemy speaks, and I don't think that that's the way we need to return it. I don't think we need to return legalism for legalism. I don't think we return hate for hate. I don't think we return discrimination for discrimination. I think there's a different way. There's a better way. We don't use threatening, violent words. And when I say threatening, violent words, is even if it's not being literal, like, well, they don't mean it literally, like need to be burnt to the ground. They mean like theologically or metaphysically or deconstruction. Like deconstruction, yeah. But we got to figure out, like, we got to come up with a better idea of a consensus of what deconstruction is. If it's just saying like, oh, I don't like these speakers, okay. But to me, I think, like, what about scholarship and really getting in there and showing like why these speakers are not speaking truth and why they're speaking out of tradition rather than the meaning of the passages is probably something to me that I would recommend. But everybody, I'm just saying we don't want to, if we fight monsters, we could become monsters. And a lot of us have become that. And have put ourselves above the even idea of having the conversation, because there have been different progressive folks who know that I've struggled with some of their wording and some of their talks, and I've asked, hey, let's talk. Can we talk about it? And they won't talk to me. Some that have like 5,000 followers, 10,000, 12,000, 13,000 followers. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't have that many followers. I'm not. I just want to have a conversation, and they won't have a conversation. And these are the people who are like bleeding heart liberals. And I've always kind of considered myself a bit of a snowflake, myself as a special liberal. And I can't even talk to my brothers and sisters in that, much less. So if we're able to not disagree well within our own group, we're not going to be able to disagree well outside of that group. So we've got a problem here. What if we did love our enemies as ourselves, but that looked different than we've been told? What if it looked like saying, you know what, if my conservative brothers and sisters want to have their place and their words and their stuff, let them have it. But we've got to come to an agreement. We've got to take maybe the politics out of it in a way. Or at least that our politics isn't about turning our convictions into legislation, but it's about saying, like, I want you to have food on your table. I want you to have health care. I want you to make a living wage. I want you to have a safe place to grow up. Maybe we start there with just saying, like, the basics. Let's fight for the basics for one another as a community and agree to disagree. If you want to have your church be legalistic, go ahead and have your legalistic church. But outside of that, as human beings, as a community, we've got to learn to realize everyone deserves the same treatment. Everyone deserves to have health care and pay their rent and be loved. Can we come up with that type of agreement that allows us to say, you know what, there's a bigger problem here. There's homelessness, there's war, there's drug addiction. You know what, maybe we figure out a way to come together and allow that to bring us together. That common good for just all humanity. And I know this sounds insane, but then I look at someone like John Hume, and it's so funny. He was like, yeah, an Irish friend of mine was like, yeah, that's our supposedly our Martin Luther, but not so great. I'm going like, no, this guy's totally great. This guy accomplished so much. This guy's amazing. And he's saying so much. And what he's trying to do is like, it's not about sides. It's about humanity. It's not about being what you know Catholic or Protestant, Northern or Southern. You know, it's nationalist or what was the other one? Union was it loyalist? You know, it's ultimately you can't eat a flag. If we kill each other and do this, we're not going to create any type of peace. So let's get to a point where we're able to compromise. So I'm going to read a few things here. Some quotes, and it's funny because he quotes King a lot, Dr. King. And so we'll read some of his quotes quoting King. But one of the things I wanted to read about is this. They started something that Hume helped start was the Social Democratic Labour Party in Ireland. And one of the things he goes, from the very beginning, the SDLP was happy to include Protestants. In fact, 3 of us who fought in the first election as independents, 2 were Catholics, 1, Ivan Cooper, was Protestant. To this day, senior members of the SDLP are Protestant, as the important issues for our party is human rights. What he's saying is like, even like we brought people who are Catholic and Protestant who are normally wanting to kill each other and hurt each other, and we've come together. That's what another thing that was really amazing about the punk movement in Northern Ireland is that Protestants and Catholics playing music together and not caring about the war. And he goes, the important issue for our party is human rights, not religion. And our objective is to continuous respect for the rights and traditions of Catholics and Protestants alike. We are both non-sectarian and anti-sectarian. Now, do you see what this is saying here is that we put humanity first. That's how we love our enemy, is we can work with our enemy to make a better world for both of us. Come together. But that requires compromise. That requires sacrifice. That requires taking up your cross, dying to your flesh. Now, these are the type of things that get us to where we want to go, rather than saying, well, we've got to... You're not going to devastate and get rid of 50% of the country. You're not going to do that. You're not going to change their minds overnight. But if we can say we want to make sure we're all able to live so we can have conversations, then there's a different... we don't need to make laws against you because of your sexuality or things like that. We need to protect minorities, of course. We need to figure out ways to talk about this so we're all want to make sure each other eats, make each other pays the bills, do these type of things, because I'm not going to be able to shut down. I'm not going to burn down every church that I disagree with, What am I going to go debate? I've tried it. I've met with a lot of these bigger pastors who didn't want LGBTQ folks at their church or serving on their boards. They wanted them at their church. They just didn't want them working for them. And, and that's going to take them more years. And then I've seen people who've changed. I saw Bill Hybels' church in Chicago turn around and get rid of all the, I don't think they're gay affirming yet, but they got rid of everything else that they were doing, all the comparative therapy or transitional, all that pray away the gay stuff. And that came through this type of conversation. But the way we argue and fight, you'd think we want each other dead. One of the things that, and this quote from John Hume here reminded me of, is when we did Revolution back in the early 2000s, when we had a venue and we would have shows, and we'd have shows with Christian bands and normal general market bands and just mix it up. And usually it worked pretty well. Every now and then, one time really, it went really bad, and this band ended up preaching against another band, and it really broke their hearts and broke my heart. And unfortunately, that band that preached, I don't know where they're at today, but it was really disrespectful. What we try to do is create a place where we could all come together and a lot of the venues were being shut down, and we just were like, hey, listen, if you guys want to fight off the property so we don't get shut down. It was really one of these things where we just wanted to be like, hey, listen, let's bring people together. And it wasn't about saying, and so I would talk to some of these Christian bands and be like, listen, no preaching. There's no preaching. I asked the other bands not to preach, and I'm asking you not to preach. Can we do that? And I remember this guy was like, I would die for my God tonight, and there was a shirt that was really popular that said that as well. I would die for my God tonight. And Hume talks about it in here. He goes, however, as I repeatedly reiterated in the 1970s, there's a very fine line between dying for Ireland and killing for Ireland. And I think there's a very fine line for dying for God and killing for God. It's this idea that that's what's on the table. That it's not about peace. It's about being a martyr. Oh, I want to be a martyr. When Paul is saying, what I'm asking you to do is to die to your identities, and saying, well, I'm this type of Christian or I'm that type of Christian to these people in Galatia, he's just saying, just be, just love each other. You practice your differences. That's okay. You just don't force your differences on other people. Don't force your theology on others. But that's the thing, is we just want it our way or the highway, and that doesn't work. And that just turns us into the type of folks that I grew up in the religious world, where it's telling me like it's either this or nothing, rather than saying like, no, you know what? I want to see us all do good. I want to see us all be able to live. I don't like what you preach or what you say, and I'm going to do something different. But I think we should also have the rights for humanity and fight for the rights for humanity. But this is the hard work. This is not the easy, happy talk. This isn't the easy sermon that you're going to hear. This isn't going to be like, the white, angry church, Christian, nationalist, angry church. This isn't going to be like, well, we've got to get rid of them and destroy them, and because they're, so horrible. That's not going to get you excited. Why isn't it not going to get you excited? It's because it's going to say, well, we're going to have to do hard work. We're going to have to talk to people that don't agree with us. We're going to have to sit down and have conversations. This is about reconciliation. There's no conservative and there's no liberal. There's no Republican and there's no Democrat. There's no straight. There's no gay. There's no black. There's no white. There's no, Then it doesn't seem as cool to hear, right? Like, everybody likes that there's neither man or woman, and everybody's like, oh, that's great. Yeah, supports my LGBTQ brothers and sisters, And then you go like, oh, there's neither Democrat or Republican. There's neither black or white. There's neither Hispanic or Asian. Then we start going like, hey, well, good, let's shut that shit down, man. But that's the point, is that we all have to die to our identity and see each other as worthy of being worthy, of human, of life, of breath, of air. We're all one. But this requires hard work, and sometimes the people are not going to see that. And then sometimes people will be like, well, that's really mighty brave of you, white heterosexual male. I know what you're thinking. And so, but I got to be me. I got to go forward. I got to do what I'm called to do, It's like, it's funny, like I was watching the X-Men cartoon because they're redoing the new X-Men cartoon. I was watching the old one with my kids, and it's like, it's just so simple, but it's just like, Professor X is like, we've got to protect the humans from Magneto. And then Magneto's like, no, we are gods and we are better than them, and it's just kind of like whole like grace versus law type of thing, or no hierarchy, and it's like, it's so funny because it's almost like a civil rights thing, but it's like nobody's nonviolent because he's got a team of like superpowered people fighting for this stuff. But it's just interesting to see, like, even in the children's thing, it's like this essence of us knowing that we really do need to learn to live amongst each other, that we do need to, like, Palestinians, people in Palestine and people in Israel needed to be able to recognize each other's humanity and allow each other to live and allow to be like, hey, this is what we don't agree with it, but this is who you are. You have the right to exist. And the other way, you have the right to, when we start saying you don't have the right to exist, things get a little screwy, right? Another thing that John Hume said, he goes, it was not the land of Ireland that was divided, it was the people of Ireland. The line on the map was geographical, but the real border was in the minds and the hearts of the people, and that could not be resolved in a week or two. And that's the thing, is a lot of people want to see these things resolved in a week or two. And I always loved the idea of the Good Friday Agreement. But I was reading this book and I was like, oh, in 1972 there was an agreement, and then in 1985 there was an agreement. Like, peace takes time. It takes work. It takes setbacks. But it also takes people who are just tired of the fighting and tired of the tired. And you get so tired that you just want to see, I just want to see everybody do good. Because right now it's like, I barely pay my bills. My health care sucks. Like, life is, like, in this country is getting weirder and weirder. How we treat each other is getting worse and worse, And honestly, it's hard for me to think about theology and philosophy and the important things, because life is so difficult. And if I really love my brothers and sisters and I really love my enemies, then I want to make sure that those folks have, enough money to go to the doctor, that, like, they won't be homeless if they get sick, and that they can eat and that they can feed their families and that they have affordable rent. I mean, so much of that was what was at the heart of the troubles, at least in Hume's eyes, when I was reading about it, was, housing and affordable housing and things like that. These practical needs that we seem to be missing with one another. And so, or maybe it's the people who have these things that are comfortable with these things that get focused on, like, well, let's ban books, and then, well, let's fight people who ban books, and let's go. And we fight fire with fire, and that just, doesn't work. A resolution could only be achieved by consensus and not by any form of coercion. You hear that? By consensus, by working together. A healing and evolutionary process is the only way to break down barriers of history, and our challenge is to create an institution within which the process will take place. I hope you guys hear what I'm trying to say, is that this is probably going to be a book that's not just needed for people in religion in the future, but it'll probably be all of us, because we are so divided. And one of the things that Martin Luther King says is Martin Luther King, the violence has, he never saw violence as a way of doing anything practical. It's impractical and it's immoral. Dr. King put it like this: it is impractical because it is descending spiral ending in destruction for all. The old law of an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. It is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than to win understanding. Now listen to that. That's what Dr. King said that. It's immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than to win understanding. So when we cancel people and we shame people and we do these things, it is to humiliate them. It is to put the scarlet letter on them. And if you've decided, like, oh, this thing Christianity is for me, well, guess what? That doesn't happen in Christianity. That's not part of Christianity. Part of Christianity is restoration and forgiveness and community and loving your enemy and doing good to those who persecute you. That's the tough shit. It's not, oh, I don't go to rated R movies, or I don't, I only support this one political group. That's not what it's about. It's about helping human beings and recognizing their humanity. I mean, that's what Jesus was doing though half the time when he was seeing people in their midst and talking to the woman at the well and things like that. She was an outcast, and what he said is, I see you as a human. I don't see you as an outcast. I see you as a person. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. And I think all you have to do is look at people's work and see where they're coming from and see how they talk about others to see where their heart lies. People always say, show me your actions, and and it's funny, the show me your actions thing, I want to say, like, we can't always trust actions either, because there was this man who lived in an apartment complex, and it was mostly African American complex, black complex, and there was a white guy, and he was kind of an outcast, and so he did everything he could to befriend this guy and help this guy and be nice to this guy and make him feel welcome in the community, and would always invite him to things and do things like that. And one day, this guy who was really nice to this white kid, he's got his sister invites him to his wedding. He wants to bring a gift, so he goes to this kid and goes, "Hey, can I hate to do this to you, man, but can I borrow some money?" And the kid was like so impressed with how nice he was that he was like, "Yeah, of course." And he's like, "Here's $60. Get something really nice for your sister and his wedding, and have a great time." And you're like, "Oh, well, this guy must have been really great." But the guy this white guy that this guy was helping, who really helped him out in the time of need, he comes back to see him, and he's not there. He's not there, and all of a sudden, all these police are there, and they're like, "Where's my buddy?" And that kid ended up being who gave him the money and he cared about and thought was really nice and tried to accept, and who was really nice back, was Jeffrey Dahmer. So even people like Jeffrey, do nice things and can be, the point is, there is like, you got to listen to words. You got to take people's in, not just their actions, but their words too. Both come in. Actions and words speak very loudly, and you need to listen to what people are saying. Now listen to this. This is really beautiful. I think this is really beautiful. We're almost done. It destroys community and makes brotherhood impossible. It leaves society in a monologue rather than a dialogue. And that's the issue, is we often just have the monologue. That's why we're talking about disagreeing well and arguing well, loving your enemy, is because that requires dialogue, not a monologue. And the problem is we've got all these people giving monologues, and everybody's turned on their boop. Now it's not just churches speaking at you and leaders, it's everybody. We're all got a monologue going on, and how do we start a dialogue? It's like now, my dad's very sick, and I've been talking to his wife, and got to talk to him last week for a few minutes, and the thing is, everybody always asks me to denounce him. Publicly denounce them, because our theologies were so different, and these are very progressive people, asking me, like, you got to denounce him, you got to speak up, you got to say something, silence is kill, and I'm going like, no, this is my father, I'm the only one who could talk to him about these issues. You're not talking to him about these issues. What you want me to be? We need to alienate our enemies so they just become even more alienated, and they don't have anybody to talk to about this stuff, and I refuse to do it. And now I'm able to have conversations with them. I've been honest about our relationship with people. But the point is that people want to have a monologue and not a dialogue. And that's what this type of thing, that's what the book of Galatians is asking us to do by dying to ourselves, dying to our identities, no matter what we make them, even if it's Christianity, dying to that and seeing the humanity of others. Hume says this: our chosen strategy accompanied reformer, reconciliation, and reunification along the path of steady progress, continually narrowing the gap between the reality and the dream, using the political means of dialogue, persuasion, negotiation, accommodation, and compromise. Violence can never heal the deep wounds that divide people. Only a healing process can end time in the division in Ireland, and it will take time. So this is a realist approach. This is a patient approach. This is why patience is a virtue, because eventually you got to see this person sign the Good Friday Agreement. Not that there's not still issues there, but it's a beautiful country. It's a loving country. It's a country that is full of survivors and people who put their differences aside and and care about each other and love each other and are doing beautiful work. I mean, it's really this just such a great country. It's such a great state, or what I mean, country, state. I don't know what we call Ireland, Northern Ireland, but it's a part of the. Yeah, I mean, it's such a great country, Northern Ireland, and the people are so wonderful, and the humanity there that is wonderful, that draws me in to that place, that continuously pulls me back in. You know. So here's one of the things that Hume writes, and I'll finish. I'm almost finished. Sorry, I'm going to keep hitting you with this because I think it's important. I think it's important to see what this, when this work is applied to humans and that it actually works. And I think it's important that we don't ignore the times that it works, because God, we could use a Hume right now for Israel and Palestine. We could use a Jimmy Carter right now. We could use people who come in and bring this process and bring the peace process rather than freaking more bombs and shit like that. Like, we don't even have people who know how to bring peace and how to have conversations anymore. You know, we all just go, oh, I'll just put a flag up and that'll make it clear that that's who I support. Like, well, I support people not dying. I support people not being taken hostage, but I also support children and babies and women and children not being bombed every day. You know, the idea is we've got to stop the madness, stop the insanity of that before I think we could even come together as people of religion and faith, you know. But we've got to respect each other's humanity. It doesn't matter what your religion is. I have to respect your humanity and make sure you're fed and taken care of and you live a loyal life so we can have these conversations. The proposal we firmly rooted in the concept of unity, listen to this, the proposal we firmly rooted in the concept of unity in diversity. Indeed, the kernel of the report we sent out to the paragraph as follows. The solution to both these historic problems and the current crisis in Northern Ireland is continuing problem in relations between Ireland and Britain and necessarily require a new structure that will accommodate together two sets of legitimate rights: the rights of the nationalist to effect political, symbolic, and administrative expression of their identity, and the right of the unionist to effect the political, symbolic, and administrative experience of their identity and their ethos of their way of life. He's saying both voices need to be heard. We've got to find a common ground. But most of us don't even want to have. We can't have common. It's too scary for us. We're too afraid, or we're too hurt, or we're too beat up, or too this, or too that. There's always excuses and reasons for us not to go forward. I'll tell you what, I suffer from something called double depression, which I thought was made up. But then I Googled it. I thought the psychiatrist made it up, but Google told me it was real, so it must be. And it's hard to want to be alive sometimes. But finding purpose like this and passion like this within my own faith and within humanity breaks the ice off of that stuff for me sometimes. You know, these moments with you are the times that I feel life again. You know, but what I guess what I'm trying to say though is, like, if I can do this work, you know, with really awful dyslexia, I can barely, you know, my writing's awful, horrible depression. I'm a survivor of attempted suicide. You can do it. We can do this together. We can heal together. You know, we can go in this together. You can't say, well, I just won't. If they don't recognize my humanity, then I don't recognize theirs. Well, okay, well, nothing changes. They stay a bigot, and they've actually won and made you kind of feel like a bigot, sound like a bigot. And I end with something that has already been said, but obviously worth repeating, is break down the real border in Ireland, which is in the hearts and minds of our people. And that's where we've created the borders, and that's where we've created the line and the hearts and minds, to the point where we don't even know how to disagree well. We actually hate each other, and we're afraid of each other, and we're scared of each other. And it's weird. Like I saw a political sticker yesterday that was like, the only thing that's going to, how to save us from socialism. And it was a Trump sticker, and I'm like going like, and I heard Trump say, we're going to get rid of socialists and Marxists, at least, and I'm going like, well, that's me, but if he wins, I can't say, well, I'm going to just hate my Republican brothers and sisters. No, we've got to find common ground in humanity, because one day it might help us all grow and become better. Because I don't know if you guys are sick and tired of all the fighting, but I certainly am. Well, thank you for spending the time with me today. Also, don't forget to like and follow us here on YouTube. That helps. My son watches a lot of YouTube videos, and they always say that, so I'm pretty sure it does help, because he watches like these guys who give away millions of dollars. So maybe we can give away millions of dollars if we get more likes. I don't know how that works. But yeah, so let's dream big. We'll start again next week with Galatians again. And thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that little sidewind of walking into Northern Irish politics and finding another civil rights leader to speak about, and the challenge today. I hope you felt it to your bone. And if you want to see this type of thing continue, we do need your support. Revolution desperately needs your support, because we are barely making it. We don't even have room to grow. I would like to be able to grow. Revolution used to be in great places, but we took a lot of unpopular stands, and that cost us a lot. I mean, honestly, when we took a stand for LGBTQ folks, we lost so much, and we never regained that. And now I think it's even greater call that Revolution has, and myself has, that is to bring people together that would never usually speak and talk to each other, and to wake each other up. But I can only do that work with your support, because you make it happen. You make it possible for me to sit down and spend hours in the Hume book, and then hours in a book on the history of Galatians, and and on these things, and allow me to do hard work. That'll hopefully get me into places where we're having hard conversations as well, and we're doing more things together. But we can't do it without you guys. We really want to raise about $70,000 this year. I think we've raised like $4,000. I don't even know if we're going to make our bills in the next 2 weeks. It's been that way for a long time. So ways you can help us is by liking this stuff, subscribing to what you're watching, sharing it with other people, sharing it on Instagram, and tagging us in those shares. Sharing it on Twitter. I mean, honestly, if you go look at our Twitter now, we have 1 or 2 likes per release at most. I think the last 2 had 0. So like Twitter is pretty much dead for us. Facebook, we get a little bit more. But share on Facebook, share with each other. You go, gee, I can't help financially, but you can help like sharing this. If you believe in what we're doing, share it with people. If you're not sharing it, then I have a feeling that there's something inside of you guys going like, there's just, I don't know if I agree with this, or if it's cool or not. And I get it. If you're, want to be a closet Jesus person, that's cool. I get it. It's not that, there's a lot of assumptions that come along with that. But folks like us have to speak out so we can end those assumptions, and say, hey, we don't all want to be divisive. A lot of us are calling for something new and something different. That's an actual reformation. It's not just an exchange of power to one side to the other. So we could really use your support. You can go to revolutionchurch.com, and we have PayPal and we have Venmo. So that's what everybody likes and uses. So we have those if you want to help. It's also tax deductible. And it allows me to pay my bills and eat food and take care of my kids, as well as do the work that I'm able to do. And I can't thank you enough for that. This is 30 years of what we've been doing. We've been doing this for 30 years. Most people with these kind of numbers and this type of stuff would probably just give up. But this is my work I love and I'm passionate about. And one day I know that it's going to pay off. I believe it. And it might be because of you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.